The dust hadn't settled yet when Samuel Hayes found her. Blood pooled beneath the overturned wagon, mixing with the red earth of New Mexico territory, creating patterns that looked almost deliberate in the harsh afternoon sun. 3 bodies lay scattered across the narrow canyon past 2 Apache warriors and a white trader, their final battle frozen in death. But it was the sound that drew him closer, a whisper, barely human, coming from beneath a torn blanket near the wagon wheel. "Child, save, child." The old Apache woman's eyes flickered open as Samuel knelt beside her, her weathered hand clutching at something hidden beneath her shawl. Blood seeped through her fingers, but her grip remained fierce, protective. She was dying. Samuel had seen enough death to know the look, but something in her gaze held him there, rooted to the scorched earth. "My granddaughter," she rasped in broken English, each word costing her precious breath. "She will come to you." Samuel's jaw tightened. He'd ridden out here alone for a reason, to escape connections, obligations, the weight of other people's lives on his conscience. The war had taken enough from him. He didn't need an Apache elder's dying wish adding to his burden. "Ma'am, I can ride to town, fetch the doctor." "No." Her hand shot out with surprising strength, gripping his wrist. "Too late for me, but you have been chosen." "Chosen lady, you don't even know me." A ghost of a smile crossed her lips. "I know. Your kind. The ones who carry death, but still have mercy." Her eyes traced the scar running from his left temple to his jaw, a souvenir from Antietam. "My husband spoke of you, the soldier who gave water to dying Apache." 3 summers passed. Samuel's blood ran cold. He remembered that day. A skirmish near Fort Stanton. He'd defied orders given his canteen to wounded Apache warriors instead of leaving them to die in the sun. His commanding officer had nearly court-martialed him for it. That was... "How did you... We remember those who show honor." She coughed, blood speckling her lips. "My granddaughter, Ayanna. She carries our people's hope. They hunt her." Who hunts her? Men who want. What she protects. The secret of the mountain. The gold that bleeds from sacred stone. Her breathing grew labored. "She will find you at the place where water meets rock 3 nights hence." Samuel wanted to pull away, to mount his horse and ride back to his isolated cabin where the only ghosts were his own. But the woman's eyes held him not with plea or desperation, but with the kind of certainty that comes from seeing beyond the veil of death. "How will I know her?" The old woman's hand trembled as she pulled something from beneath her shawl, a piece of turquoise carved into the shape of a thunderbird, strung on a leather cord stained with her blood. "Give her this. Tell her Nahaz-Zan sent you. Nahaz-Zan, that your name, it means Earth Mother. Was keeper of the old ways." Her voice grew fainter. "Promise me. Promise you will not let them take her." "I don't make promises to strangers, ma'am." "You already have," she whispered, her eyes seeing something beyond him. "The moment you gave water to our dying. The spirits marked you as protector." Samuel felt the weight of her words settling on his shoulders like a millstone. He'd spent 5 years trying to forget the war, the promises he'd made, and broken the men he'd failed to save. Now this dying woman wanted him to take on another burden. "Your granddaughter, she got family elsewhere, somewhere safe. All dead. Soldiers. Disease. Whiskey." The bitterness in her voice cut deep. "She is the last of the blood, the last who knows the true path." Thunder rumbled in the distance, though the sky remained cloudless. The old woman's eyes widened as if hearing something in that sound that Samuel couldn't. "They come," she gasped. "The hunters. You must go. I can't just leave you. I'm already walking. The spirit trail." She pressed the thunderbird into his palm, her blood warm against his skin. 3 nights. Where water meets rock. Save her. Save what remains of us." Her hand fell away, and with it, the last breath escaped her lips. Samuel sat there for a moment, the turquoise burning in his palm, the weight of another unwanted promise settling into his bones. He could hear horses approaching, maybe 5, 6 riders coming fast through the canyon. He should leave, mount his bay stallion, and ride hard for home. Forget this encounter. Forget the promise he hadn't meant to make. But as he looked at the old woman's face, peaceful now in death, he saw his own mother's face the way she'd looked when the fever took her, while he was off fighting a war that seemed to matter less with each passing year. Samuel stood pocketing the Thunderbird and quickly searched the wagon. Most of the supplies were scattered or ruined, but tucked beneath the driver's seat, wrapped in oiled leather, he found it a map drawn on deerskin, marked with symbols he didn't recognize, and at its center, a mountain that bled gold beneath a thunder moon. The horses were closer now. Samuel could hear men's voices rough and eager. He grabbed what he could, the map, a beaded medicine bag, a cavalry pistol that looked military issue, and swung onto his horse. As he rode away, he heard the first shouts of the arriving riders finding the bodies. "The old woman's dead. Search her. The map's gotta be here. What about the girl? She here. No sign, but she can't have gone far. Spread out." Samuel pushed his stallion harder, the Thunderbird seeming to pulse against his chest, where he'd hung it beneath his shirt. 3 nights, where water meets rock. He knew the place, a small spring near Devil's Canyon, where he sometimes watered his horse. But why there, why him? As he crested the ridge, he looked back once at the scene below. Vultures were already circling. The riders were tearing through the wagon's remains like wolves at a carcass. Whatever this Ayana was protecting, these men would kill for it. And now, somehow, he'd been pulled into it. The ride home took 2 hours through rough country, giving Samuel too much time to think about what he'd just promised, or what had been promised for him according to the old woman. The spirits marked you as protector. He didn't believe in spirits Apache or otherwise, but he believed in the weight of dying words, the power of final wishes. By the time he reached his cabin, the sun was setting, painting the desert the color of dried blood. Tomorrow would bring questions, preparations. In 3 nights, a stranger would come looking for him, a woman carrying secrets men would kill for. Samuel unsaddled his horse, his movements automatic, but his mind was elsewhere, on a grandmother's blood-stained hands, on hunters who moved like wolves, on a promise he'd somehow made 3 years ago with a simple act of kindness. He pulled out the Thunderbird, studying it in the fading light. Such a small thing to carry such weight. But then he'd learned long ago that the smallest things, a mini ball, a moment's hesitation, a cup of water, could change the course of a life. Or end it. Samuel Hayes wasn't the kind of man who attracted attention, and that was exactly how he preferred it. At 38, he carried himself with the measured movements of someone who'd learned that sudden gestures could get you killed. His cabin sat 15 miles outside of Cedar Ridge, New Mexico territory, far enough that visitors were rare and welcome even rarer. The structure itself spoke of a man who built for function, not comfort, thick walls to keep out wind and bullets, narrow windows positioned for defense rather than light, a well dug deep enough to outlast any siege. The morning after finding Nahasdzan, Samuel stood at that well drawing water with mechanical precision while his mind churned. The Thunderbird pendant lay heavy in his shirt pocket, its weight disproportionate to its size. He'd barely slept, haunted, not by the old woman's death. He'd seen too much death for one more to disturb his sleep, but by her certainty. The spirits marked you as protector. Spirits! He muttered, pouring water into the trough for his horse. If there were spirits, they've got a twisted sense of humor. His bay stallion Bourbon snorted as if in agreement. Samuel had named him after the whiskey that had gotten him through the first year after the war, before he had realized drowning memories only made them learn to swim. Now he stayed sober, preferring the sharp edges of recollection to the fuzzy helplessness of forgetting. The sun climbed higher, baking the earth until it cracked like old leather. Samuel went through his morning routine, checking his rifles, counting ammunition, inspecting the fence line, but his thoughts kept returning to the woman who was supposedly coming. Ayanna. The name meant something in Apache, though he didn't know what. All he knew was that she was running from men who'd kill for gold, and somehow he'd been chosen to stand between them. Chosen, he said aloud, testing the word. It felt foreign in his mouth, like trying to speak around a stone. He'd been chosen once before. Captain Hayes, they'd called him. Chosen to lead boys barely old enough to shave into battles that turned them into corpses or killers. Chosen to make decisions that haunted him still, which farm to burn, which prisoner to release, which wounded to leave behind when retreat became necessary. After Antietam, after watching his younger brother die in his arms from a gut wound that took 3 days to kill him, Samuel had decided he was done being chosen for anything. Yet here he was, cleaning his Winchester and counting bullets, preparing for a fight that wasn't his. The day passed slowly. Samuel repaired a section of fence, shot a rabbit for supper, and tried not to think about what was coming. But as the sun began its descent, painting the desert in shades of copper and blood, he found himself studying the map he'd taken from the wagon. The markings were unlike anything he'd seen, not quite pictures, not quite words, but at the center, clear as day, was a mountain that looked like a thunderbird in flight, and beneath it, veins of gold drawn like lightning strikes, sacred ground from the look of it. The kind of place that should stay hidden, but never did once white men got wind of gold. The secret of the mountain, Nahas-Dzan had called it, the gold that bleeds from sacred stone. Samuel had seen what gold fever did to men, had watched California tear itself apart, seen families murdered for claims, towns destroyed by greed. If this map was real, if there really was Apache gold hidden in these mountains, then the woman coming to him, this Ayanna, was carrying a death sentence. 2 days to prepare. 2 days to decide if he was really going to do this. That night, he dreamed of his wife Margaret. She stood in their old kitchen in Virginia, the one that had burned when the Confederate raiders came through. She was making bread, her hands white with flour, humming a hymn he couldn't quite place. "You're going to help her," she said without looking up. "It's not my fight, Maggie." "Since when has that stopped you?" She turned, and her face was not as he remembered it, not young and soft with love, but older, marked by years she'd never lived to see. "You gave water to dying Apache. You think that was your fight? That was different. That was mercy." She smiled sad and knowing. "And this isn't. This is about gold, about greed. No, Samuel, this is about a promise, and you've never broken a promise, not even when it broke you." He woke with her name on his lips and tears on his face, something that hadn't happened in years. The cabin was cold, the fire dead, and outside coyotes howled at a moon that looked too much like bone. The next day brought unexpected visitors. 2 men from town, their horses lathered with sweat dust thick on their clothes. Samuel recognized one Pete Garrett who ran supplies between Cedar Ridge and Fort Stanton. The other was a stranger, tall and lean, with eyes like a rattlesnake's. "Samuel," Pete called out, keeping his hands visible. He knew better than to approach unannounced. "Mind if we water our horses?" "Help yourself." Samuel stayed on the porch rifle, casual in his hands, but ready. "Long ride from town." "Following some fellows who've been asking questions," Pete said, dismounting. "Thought you should know. They're looking for an Apache woman, young, traveling alone, offering good money for information." "That's so." The stranger spoke up, his voice smooth as oil. $500 they're offering. Must be some woman. Must be. Samuel kept his expression neutral. They say what they want with her. Does it matter? The stranger smiled, showing too many teeth. $500 buys a lot of not caring. Pete shot the man a look. This is Tom Brennan. He's new to the territory. Welcome to New Mexico, Mr. Brennan. Samuel's tone suggested anything but welcome. Hope you find it to your liking. Brennan's eyes narrowed. You hear anything about this Apache woman, there could be a finder's fee in it for you too. I'll keep that in mind. They watered their horses in silence after that, but Samuel could feel Brennan's eyes on him calculating. When they left, Pete lingered a moment. Be careful, Samuel. These men asking questions. They're not regular bounty hunters. They've got military bearing, but they're not army. And that Brennan fellow, he attached himself to me the moment I mentioned I knew the folks out this way. Appreciate the warning, Pete. You know I don't care what a man does with his business, but if you see this woman they're hunting, might be best if you didn't. After they left, Samuel spent the rest of the day preparing for trouble. He loaded extra magazines, filled every water barrel, and saddled bourbon in case a quick escape became necessary. As the sun set on the second day, he found himself checking the Thunderbird pendant repeatedly, as if it might give him some sign. Tomorrow night, where water meets rock. He'd go, he realized, not because he believed in spirits or destiny, but because he'd looked into a dying woman's eyes and seen his mother, his wife, his brother, all the people he'd failed to save. Maybe he couldn't help this Ayanna. Maybe she wouldn't even show up, but he'd be there waiting because that's what you did when someone's last words asked you to. That night, he cleaned his guns one more time and tried not to think about what kind of woman would brave the desert alone carrying secrets worth killing for. Tried not to wonder if she was frightened, desperate, proud. Tried not to imagine her face, whether it carried the same fierce certainty as her grandmother's. Ayanna, he said aloud, testing the name. Unlike chosen, this word didn't feel foreign. It felt like a prayer, or maybe a promise. Outside, the coyotes had gone silent. The desert held its breath waiting. And somewhere out there, a woman was making her way toward him, carrying the weight of her people's secrets and the hope of a dying grandmother. Samuel checked his rifle one more time, then stepped out onto the porch. The stars were sharp as glass against the black sky, and the air carried the scent of sage and something else. Something that might have been fate if he'd believed in such things. Tomorrow would bring answers, or more questions, or maybe just death. But tonight, he stood guard over nothing but desert and memory, a soldier again, despite himself waiting for a war he hadn't chosen but couldn't walk away from. The Thunderbird seemed to pulse against his chest, heartbeat steady, as if counting down the hours until everything changed. The third night arrived with a dust storm on the horizon, the sky churning amber and brown like a bruise spreading across heaven. Samuel reached the spring at dusk, the place where water meets rock, a natural basin carved into red stone, where underground springs bubbled up, creating a small oasis in the harsh landscape. He'd discovered it years ago, his own secret sanctuary, where the sound of water could almost drown out the echoes of cannon fire that still lived in his skull. He positioned himself behind a cluster of boulders, Winchester across his lap, and waited. The Thunderbird pendant lay against his chest, warm as living flesh. As darkness fell, memories rose like smoke from a dying fire, unbidden and unwanted. Margaret's voice drifted through his mind. "You're leaving again, aren't you?" It had been their last conversation, spring of 1862. He'd stood in their doorway wearing his new captain's uniform, trying to look like a man with purpose instead of a fool about to abandon everything that mattered. 6 months, he'd promised. Maybe less. This war can't last. Wars last exactly as long as it takes to kill everyone who remembers why they started. She touched his face fingers, tracing the spot where years later shrapnel would leave its mark. When you come back, you won't be the same man. I'll still love you. Yes. She'd said sadly, "But you'll love me like a ghost loves the living from a distance through a veil you can never lift." She'd been dead 2 years when he finally made it home. Typhoid, the neighbors said, took half the county. But Samuel knew the truth. She'd died of waiting, of watching the road for a man who'd forgotten the way back. A twig snapped, pulling him from the past. Something moved in the darkness beyond the spring. Not something, someone. Walking carefully but not silently, as if announcing their presence, without words. She emerged from the shadows like dawn, breaking in reverse darkness, giving way to form rather than light. Tall for an Apache woman, moving with the fluid grace of someone raised between two worlds. Her deerskin dress was torn at the shoulder, dried blood staining the leather. Her hair fell loose past her waist, tangled with twigs and desert dust. But it was her eyes that stopped his breath, dark as the space between stars, carrying a weight that had nothing to do with her years. "You carry grandmother's thunder," she said in accented English, not a question but a statement. Samuel stepped out slowly, hands visible. "You're Ayanna, and you are the one who gave water to our dying." She studied him with an intensity that made him feel exposed, as if she could see through skin to the scarred thing he called a soul. Samuel Hayes, the soldier who disobeyed. That was a long time ago. Time means nothing to the dead. They remember everything. She swayed slightly, and he noticed the way she held her left arm, careful, protective. "Wounded. You're hurt." "I've been hurt before." But even as she said it, her knees buckled. Samuel caught her before she hit the ground, his arm suddenly full of unexpected weight and warmth. This close, he could see the exhaustion written in every line of her face, the fever bright in her eyes. "When's the last time you drank water?" 2 days, maybe 3. Her voice carried no self-pity, just fact. "The hunters, they're close." Samuel half carried her to the spring, setting her down carefully against the rocks. She drank deeply while he examined her arm, a bullet graze, infected but not fatal if treated soon. "I need to clean this wound." "After." She pulled something from inside her dress, the deerskin map wrapped in oilcloth. "This must be hidden first." "Gold's not worth dying for." Her laugh was bitter as winter wind. "You think this is about gold. Gold is what white men see because gold is all they understand. This map, it shows the burial ground of the last great chiefs, the place where our medicine bundles were hidden when the army came, the stories of our people written in stone." She pressed it into his hands. "If they find it, they'll destroy everything to get to the gold they imagine is there." Samuel took the map, feeling its weight, not physical, but cultural, spiritual. "Why trust me?" "Because grandmother saw your past in her dreams. A man who lost everything to war. A man who knows the weight of ghosts." "Your grandmother didn't know me." "She knew enough." Ayanna's eyes found his. "Tell me about your wife." The question hit like a physical blow. "That's not 'tell me.' It wasn't a demand, but an invitation. The dead travel with you. I can feel them." Samuel found himself speaking words pulled from depths he'd thought sealed. Margaret. Her name was Margaret. Hair like autumn leaves. Hands that could coax life from dead soil. She made me believe I was better than I was. How did she die? Alone. Sick. Waiting for a man who chose war over home. The confession burned his throat. "I found her grave marker next to our son's. He lived 3 days. She named him Samuel after me. I never even knew she was pregnant when I left." Ayanna reached out with her good hand, touching the scar on his face. "This antetum, shrapnel from a cannon blast, killed my brother instantly. I held him while he died, trying to push his insides back where they belonged." He couldn't stop now, words flowing like blood from an opened vein. "He was 17, followed me to war because he thought I was a hero." "You were." "I was a fool who confused duty with purpose." He pulled away from her touch. "Now I live out here where the only casualties are rabbits and memories." Yet you came tonight. Your grandmother didn't give me much choice. There's always a choice. You chose mercy 3 years ago. You choose it again now." She winced as she shifted. "My turn for confession since we're trading wounds." She told him about the massacre at Cañon del Muerto, where soldiers had trapped her band in a box canyon and systematically killed everyone, warriors, women, children. She'd survived by hiding beneath her mother's body, staying still, while soldiers walked among the dead, finishing off anyone who moaned. "I was 15. After that, grandmother raised me, taught me the old ways, the songs, the stories. I am the last who knows them all. When I die, my people die with me. You're not dying. Not tonight. Everyone dies, Samuel Hayes. The question is whether anything of us survives." She pulled out a small leather pouch. "Grandmother said you would understand this." Inside was a photograph, water-stained and fading. A young soldier in Union blue standing beside a woman in a wedding dress. Samuel recognized himself, though he could barely reconcile that hopeful face with the man he'd become. How did she found it at Fort Stanton in records of soldiers who'd shown kindness to Apache prisoners. She'd been searching for you for 2 years. Why? Because the spirits told her you were the bridge, the one who could stand between 2 worlds without belonging to either. Ayanna's eyes grew heavy. I fought her vision, told her I needed no white protector, but she said, you weren't meant to protect me. We were meant to protect each other. Before Samuel could respond, she collapsed fully, the fever finally claiming consciousness. He caught her, held her against his chest, felt the rabbit quick beat of her heart. She weighed almost nothing, as if survival had carved away everything non-essential, leaving only will and purpose. He carried her to Bourbon, who surprisingly didn't shy away from the unfamiliar burden. As he settled her in front of him, her head lolled against his shoulder, and she murmured something in Apache. He didn't understand the words, but the tone was clear, a prayer, or maybe a goodbye. The ride back to his cabin took forever and no time at all. Samuel held her steady, feeling the heat of her fever through her dress, watching the darkness for signs of pursuit. But the desert remained quiet, as if holding its breath. Inside the cabin, he laid her on his bed, the first person besides himself to occupy it since he'd built this place. He cleaned and dressed her wound by lamplight. Forced water between her lips covered her with every blanket he owned. Then he sat in his chair, rifle across his lap, and kept watch. She thrashed in fever dreams, speaking in Apache and English, sometimes crying out names he didn't recognize. Once she sat bolt upright, eyes wide but unseeing, and said clearly, "The thunder comes with blood on its wings." He thought about Nahasdzan's words, "The spirits marked you as protector." Maybe they had. Or maybe 2 broken people had simply found each other in a broken land, drawn together by loss and the terrible hope that there might be something beyond mere survival. As dawn approached, Ayanna's fever broke. She opened her eyes, focused this time, and found him still keeping watch. "You stayed." "Said I would." "No," she whispered. "You said nothing, but you stayed anyway. That's how I know grandmother was right about you." Outside, a hawk cried, greeting the new day. Samuel thought about the map hidden beneath his floorboards, about the hunters still searching, about the choice he'd made without making it. "They'll come," Ayanna said. "Let them." She studied his face for a long moment. "You're not the same man in that photograph." "No. That man died somewhere between Antietam and finding his family's graves." "Then who are you now?" Samuel considered the question, feeling the weight of his ghosts, the pull of this unexpected obligation, the strange lightness of having someone to protect again. "I don't know, but maybe that's the point." The hunters came with the morning sun, their shadows long and dark across the desert floor. Samuel saw them from the ridge, 6 riders moving in formation, military trained despite their civilian clothes. They'd found his trail, or maybe Ayanna's, or maybe they'd simply followed the invisible thread that connected hunter to prey across empty miles. He returned to the cabin to find Ayanna standing despite his protests that she should rest. She'd braided her hair, changed into one of his shirts that hung on her like a tent, and strapped his spare Colt to her hip with practiced ease. "You should be in bed. Beds are for dying or loving. I intend neither today." She checked the revolver's cylinder with steady hands. "How many?" "6. Maybe 20 minutes out." "We could run." "Could. Won't." Samuel began loading rifles, laying them out on the table. "Running just delays the reckoning. Better to face it on ground of our choosing." She watched him work, something shifting in her expression. "You're not doing this for the promise to grandmother." "No." "Then why?" He paused, a cartridge half loaded. "Because I'm tired of surviving. Want to try living instead, even if it's just for 20 minutes. "That's a foolish reason to die." "Got a better one." She moved closer, close enough that he could smell sage and smoke in her hair. "How about this? We don't die. We live, and we make them regret finding us." "That's ambitious for a woman who could barely stand yesterday." "I'm Apache. We're made of harder things than fever." She touched his arm, her fingers warm through his shirt. "But I need to know something first. Can you kill for me? Not for duty, or country, or survival, but for me." The question hung between them like a blade. Samuel thought of all the men he'd killed, faces he remembered, and ones he'd forgotten, necessary deaths and wasteful ones. He'd never killed for love, only for abstracts like honor and obligation. "I don't know," he said honestly, "but I guess we're about to find out." She nodded, respecting the honesty. "Then I'll tell you a secret, Samuel Hayes. The map they want. It's not the only one. There are 3. Grandmother had one. The other 2 are with different keepers hidden across the territory. Even if they get this one, they get nothing but a piece of a puzzle." "Why tell me now?" "Because if we die, someone should know the truth isn't dying with us." She moved to the window, peering through the gap in the shutters. "They're spreading out, surrounding us." Samuel handed her a rifle. "You know how to use this." Her smile was sharp as a blade. "I was shooting rabbits at 50 yards when I was 8. Men are bigger targets." A voice called from outside, cultured and confident. "Samuel Hayes, we know you're in there. We know you have the woman. Send her out, and we'll let you live." Samuel recognized the voice, Tom Brennan, the snake-eyed man who'd come with Pete Garrett. Of course, he'd been scouting, not just asking questions. "That's a generous offer, Brennan," Samuel called back. "But I'm comfortable where I am." "Don't be a fool, Hayes. You're one man with a savior complex. We're 6 men with a job to do. The woman has something that doesn't belong to her." Ayanna laughed, bitter and bright. "Tell him the truth belongs to everyone and no one." "The lady says you're mistaken about ownership," Samuel relayed. "The lady's people are dead or dying. Their secrets don't matter anymore, but the gold does. Progress, Hayes, civilization. That gold could build towns, churches, schools. Could build a lot of graves, too. Last chance, Hayes. Send her out." Samuel looked at Ayanna. She stood straight despite her wound eyes, fierce, ready to fight or die, but not surrender. In that moment, he saw not just her, but all the last stands he'd witnessed, boys holding positions they couldn't hold, women defending homes, already lost the beautiful futility of courage against odds. "Tell you what, Brennan, you and your men ride away now, and I won't have to explain to the territorial marshal why 6 bodies are fertilizing my land." "You're that confident. I'm that committed." Silence stretched. Then Brennan's voice, harder now. "So be it." The first shot shattered the window, showering them with glass. Samuel pulled Ayanna down as bullets punched through the walls, seeking flesh. The cabin he'd built for isolation became a fortress, its thick walls absorbing most of the ammunition, but not all. "Kitchen window," Ayanna said, already moving. She fired twice, controlled and calm. A man screamed. Samuel took the front, picking his shots carefully. These weren't raw recruits or rage-blind raiders. These were professionals using cover, advancing carefully. But Samuel had defended worse positions with worse odds. and now, for the first time in years, he had something worth defending. The battle lasted 15 minutes, but felt like hours. Smoke filled the cabin. Blood, his or hers, he couldn't tell, slicked the floor. A bullet creased his shoulder. Another caught Ayanna's thigh, dropping her behind the overturned table. "How many left?" she gasped, pressing a torn piece of shirt to her leg. "3, maybe 4. He reloaded with bloody fingers. "You still alive over there?" Alive is relative. Breathing definitely. Despite everything, he almost smiled. Then he heard horses approaching fast. More hunters' reinforcements. But the gunfire that erupted outside wasn't aimed at the cabin. Samuel risked a look and saw something impossible: Apache warriors, maybe 8 of them, attacking Brennan's remaining men from behind. The hunters, caught between the cabin and the unexpected assault, broke and ran. One warrior, older than the others, with gray streaking his hair, rode to the cabin door. "Ayanna, grandmother's spirit said we would find you here." Ayanna limped to the door, speaking rapid Apache. The warrior, who introduced himself as Joseph Crow Feather, looked at Samuel with eyes that weighed and measured. "You are the water giver. Just a man with a cabin and too many bullets." "No. You are the one grandmother dreamed, the bridge between worlds." He gestured to his warriors. "We've been searching for Ayanna since the massacre. Grandmother's spirit came to me 3 nights ago, told me to come here." Samuel wanted to dismiss it as coincidence, but the timing was too perfect. 3 nights ago, Nahas-Zan had died in his arms. "Is she safe now? Can you take her?" Joseph shook his head. "Nowhere is safe. The hunters will keep coming. The army, the traders, the fortune seekers. Unless—" He looked at Ayanna, speaking in Apache. She translated her voice, tired but determined. "He says there's only one way to protect the secret. The keepers of the 3 maps must come together, perform the ceremony, and destroy them all. Let the location die with the old ways. But that means, yes, the medicine bundles, the stories carved in stone, all of it stays buried forever." Her eyes found his. "Unless we find another way." "What other way?" She was quiet for a moment. Then, "You said you don't belong to either world." "Neither do I." "Not anymore. Apache by blood, but raised between 2 peoples. You're white by birth, but carrying Apache ghosts. Maybe that's the answer." "I don't understand." Joseph spoke Ayanna, translating. "He says the spirits work in patterns we don't see until the design is complete. Grandmother saw you in dreams for 2 years before she died. She saw this moment, you and I, standing in blood and smoke, choosing between old ways and new. What choice? Whether to bury the past or find a way to preserve it that doesn't destroy it." She limped closer, her hand finding his. "Samuel Hayes, I need to ask you something, and I need the truth. Do you believe in anything anymore? God, spirits, destiny, anything beyond what you can shoot or touch?" He thought about it, really thought about it. The impossible timing of the Apache warriors, Nahas-Zan's certainty, the way Ayanna fit against him like she'd always belonged there. "I believe in you," he said finally. "Don't know if that's enough, but it's what I've got." She squeezed his hand. "It's a start." Joseph and his warriors helped them clean and bandage their wounds. As the sun peaked, they sat in council, Apache and white traditional and displaced, all bound by blood and circumstance. "There is a way," Joseph said, finally speaking English for Samuel's benefit. "The territorial government has been setting aside lands for preservation, sacred sites they call them. If we could convince them the mountain is historically significant without mentioning gold—" "They'd never listen to Apache voices," Ayanna said. "No, but they might listen to his." Joseph nodded at Samuel. "A war hero, a white man who speaks for preservation rather than exploitation." Samuel felt the weight of another unwanted responsibility settling on his shoulders, but looking at Ayanna, at her fierce hope despite everything, he knew his answer. "All right, but we do this together, all of us. Apache and white working as one." That's the only way it works. Joseph extended his hand. Samuel shook it. Ayanna placed her hand over both of theirs. "The bridge between worlds," she murmured. Grandmother saw it all. As the Apache warriors prepared to leave, promising to return with the other map keepers, Ayanna stayed behind. Her wound needed rest, she said, but Samuel suspected other reasons. When they were alone, she said, "You could have let them take me. Would have been easier. Nothing about you seems easy." Is that a complaint? An observation. He helped her to the bed, trying not to notice how natural it felt to care for her. "Rest. Tomorrow we start fighting a different kind of war." "Samuel." She caught his hand as he turned to go. "What you said about believing in me." "Yeah, I believe in you too. Grandmother was right. You're the one who gives water in the desert even to enemies. Maybe especially to enemies." He squeezed her hand, then let go. There would be time later for whatever was growing between them. Now there was planning to do letters to write a sacred mountain to save, but for just a moment standing in his shot-up cabin with blood on the floor and hope in the air, Samuel felt something he hadn't felt since before, the war purpose. Not duty, not obligation, but actual purpose. Outside, eagles circled in the thermal currents, riding invisible paths through the sky. Samuel watched them and thought about bridges and patterns and the strange ways the world knits itself together from broken pieces. The decision came at dawn 3 days after the firefight, with Ayanna's fever finally broken and her eyes clear. "We need to marry." Samuel nearly dropped the coffee pot. "Come again." "Marriage. You and me. Today, if possible." She sat up in bed, wincing at her wounded leg, but keeping her voice steady. "It's the only way. Woman, you've been shot, fevered, and nearly died. Maybe we should talk about this when you're not delirious." "I'm not delirious. I'm practical." She gestured for him to sit. "Listen to me, Samuel Hayes. The territorial government won't recognize Apache land claims. The Army sees us as hostiles or wards of the state, nothing in between. But a white man's wife, that's different. That's property law, inheritance rights, legal standing." Samuel felt something cold settle in his stomach. "You want to marry me for legal protection? I want to marry you because it's the bridge Grandmother saw." Her eyes found his dark and serious. "Two worlds joined in the only way white law recognizes. You can speak for the land because you're white male, a war veteran. I can speak for it because I know its true meaning. Together, we become something neither of us is alone legitimate in both worlds." That's the worst marriage proposal I've ever heard. "How many have you heard? Including this one too." Despite everything, she smiled. "What did the first one sound like? Margaret's father pointed a shotgun at me and said I'd either marry his daughter or fertilize his tobacco field. And you chose marriage. I chose Margaret, would have chosen her without the shotgun." He studied Ayanna's face, looking for doubt, finding only determination. "This is different. You don't know me." "Not really. I know you stood between me and 6 men who wanted me dead. I know you gave water to dying Apache when it could have cost you everything. I know you've been faithful to a ghost for 5 years." She shifted, pulled something from beneath the pillow, a small beaded band, intricate and old. "This was my mother's wedding bracelet. Grandmother saved it from the massacre. I'm not proposing lightly, Samuel." "What about love? What about survival?" she countered. "Love is luxury for people who aren't being hunted. Respect, trust, partnership, these things I can offer now. The rest," she paused. "The rest might come, or it might not. But without this, there is no later to find out." Samuel stood, paced to the window. Outside, the desert stretched endless, unmarked by human ambition. He thought about the simplicity of his isolated life, the safety of solitude. Then he thought about Ayanna's hand in his during the firefight, the way she'd said, "I believe in you too." "Joseph won't like it. Your people won't like it." "My people are dead or scattered. Joseph understands necessity." She pulled herself to the edge of the bed, testing her wounded leg. "Your people won't like it either." "Don't have people." "Exactly. We're both orphans of different wars. Maybe that's why this works." A knock at the door interrupted them. Samuel grabbed his rifle, but it was Pete Garrett alone this time, his face grim. "Samuel, we need to talk." His eyes found Ayanna widened slightly, but he didn't comment. "Brennan survived. He's in town talking to the army, saying you're harboring Apache hostiles, that you ambushed him and his men who were on legitimate bounty business." "That's a lie." "Course it is, but he's got the ear of Colonel Morrison at Fort Stanton. They're forming a detail to come get her. And you, if you resist." Ayanna and Samuel exchanged glances. She nodded slightly. "Pete," Samuel said slowly, "you still a justice of the peace? Such as it is in this territory, yeah." "Can you perform a marriage?" Pete's eyebrows climbed toward his hairline. "You serious, dead serious? Right now, if you're willing." Pete looked between them, understanding dawning. A wife can't be removed from her husband's land without cause. Smart. Crazy, but smart. He pulled out a small leather book from his jacket. "You got witnesses." "Give us an hour." Pete nodded. "I'll wait. But Samuel, you sure about this marriage is permanent, legal or not?" "Nothing's permanent, Pete, but some things are worth pretending otherwise." After Pete stepped outside, Samuel helped Ayanna stand. She leaned against him, testing her weight on the wounded leg. "We need Joseph here, and at least one person from town who isn't Apache." She looked up at him. "Do you have anyone?" Samuel thought about it. There was one person, Mrs. Chen, who ran the laundry in town. She'd never asked questions about the blood on his clothes. When he'd first arrived, had simply cleaned them and offered tea. Her husband had been killed in California during the gold rush violence. She understood being an outsider. "Maybe. I'll send word." Within 2 hours, an unlikely wedding party assembled in Samuel's shot-up cabin. Joseph Crow Feather arrived with 2 warriors, his face carefully neutral when told of the plan. Mrs. Chen came in her best dress, a faded blue thing that had seen better decades, carrying a basket of bread and salt for luck, she said in accented English. Pete cleared his throat, opened his book. "This is irregular as hell, but then nothing about this territory is regular. Samuel Hayes. Do you take this woman? What's your full name?" "Miss Ayanna Rose Nahasdzan. Rose was my missionary name. Nahasdzan for my grandmother." "Do you take Ayanna Rose Nahasdzan as your lawful wedded wife?" Samuel looked at her. She stood straight despite her wounds, wearing his shirt and her torn dress, her mother's bracelet on her wrist. Beautiful in her defiance, magnificent in her determination. "I do." "Ayanna, do you take Samuel Hayes as your lawful wedded husband?" She spoke first in Apache words that Joseph translated. "I take this man as the keeper of my days and guardian of my nights until the mountains fall or the stars forget their paths." Then in English, "I do." Rings. Samuel remembered the silver band he'd kept in a drawer Margaret's, which he'd removed from her cold finger before burying her. He'd meant to bury it with her, but couldn't let go. Now he pulled it out, offered it to Ayanna. "This belonged to my first wife. If that bothers you, the dead bless the living when their memory serves love instead of sorrow." She took the ring, slipped it on. It fit perfectly, as if Margaret herself had blessed this moment. Ayanna pulled a turquoise ring from her pouch, rough-carved but beautiful. "This was my father's, a warrior's ring. You fought for me, so you are warrior enough to wear it." The ring was too small for his ring finger, but fit his smallest finger perfectly. "Then, by the authority vested in me by the territory of New Mexico, such as it is, I pronounce you married." Pete closed his book. "God help you both." Joseph stepped forward, spoke in Apache. Ayanna translated, "He says the spirits witness what the law has bound. He says..." She paused, emotion catching her voice. "He says grandmother's spirit is here smiling." Mrs. Chen broke the moment by pressing bread into their hands. "Eat together. First meal as married. Important." They shared the bread, standing in the cabin with its bullet holes and bloodstains, surrounded by an Apache elder Chinese widow and frontier justice. It was perhaps the strangest wedding the territory had ever seen. After the witnesses left, promising to spread word of the marriage to complicate any army action, Samuel and Ayanna sat alone. "So, we're married." "We are." She looked at the ring on her finger. "Thank you for understanding why it had to be now." "Don't thank me yet. Being married to me hasn't worked out well historically. Being Apache hasn't worked out well for me either. Maybe our bad luck will cancel out." He laughed, surprised by the sound. "That's not how luck works. How would you know you've been hiding from it for 5 years?" She had a point. He helped her back to bed, their bed now legally, and began cleaning the breakfast dishes. The domesticity of it felt surreal after the morning ceremony. "Samuel, yeah, we need to be truly married, in all ways." Her voice was steady, but he heard the nervousness beneath. "The army will investigate. Brennan will challenge it. We need to be convincing." He turned to face her. "Ayanna, I won't. I mean, you don't have to. I know." She met his eyes. "But I choose to. Not from obligation, but from decision. We've bound our lives legally. Our bodies are just flesh. But the choice, Samuel, the choice matters." That night, with infinite care for her wounds and his own broken places, they became husband and wife in truth. Not with passion that would come later, but with deliberate tenderness, each touch a promise, each kiss a bridge between worlds. Afterward, she lay with her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "Your heart sounds like thunder," she murmured. "That's fear." "Of what?" "Of failing you. Of this being another promise I can't keep." She raised up, looked into his eyes. "Samuel Hayes, you already kept the only promise that mattered. You stayed. When I fell, you stayed. When they came, you stayed. When I asked for something impossible, you stayed. The rest is just details." Outside, coyotes called to each other across the desert. Inside, two people who'd been strangers a week ago lay intertwined, legally bound, spiritually connected, and surprisingly, despite everything, not unhappy. "Grandmother was right," Ayanna whispered as sleep took her. "The bridge is built." Samuel held her, feeling the weight of the ring on his finger, the warmth of her body against his, the strange sensation of a future he hadn't planned for. Tomorrow would bring the Army Brennan's accusations, the challenge of protecting not just Ayanna, but the sacred land she carried in her memory. But tonight, in a bullet-riddled cabin in the middle of nowhere, Samuel Hayes was no longer alone, and somehow that made everything else bearable. The morning after their wedding, Samuel woke to find Ayanna already upstanding at the stove, attempting to make coffee with one hand while balancing on her good leg. "You should be resting. Wives make coffee. I read that in a missionary book once." "You read the wrong books." He took the pot from her, guided her to a chair. "Besides, you make coffee like you're trying to punish it for existing. Coffee is meant to be strong. Coffee is meant to be drinkable. What you make could strip paint." She watched him work, noting the practiced efficiency of his movements. "You've been alone too long. You move like you're afraid of taking up space in your own home." "Our home," he corrected, then stopped, surprised by how easily the word came. "Yes, our home." She looked around the cabin, seeing it with new eyes. "It needs work. It's functional. It's a fortress pretending to be a cabin. No color, no warmth, no sign that anyone lives here instead of just surviving here." Before he could respond, hoofbeats approached. Samuel grabbed his rifle, but Ayanna placed a hand on his arm. "That's Joseph's horse. I know the gate." Joseph Crow Feather entered with two younger Apache women, both carrying bundles. He spoke in Apache, and Ayanna translated, though her cheeks colored slightly. He says a new wife needs proper clothes. These are my cousins, Mary and Sarah. They survived the massacre by being at the mission school." She switched to Apache, speaking rapidly with the women who giggled and cast glances at Samuel. "What are they saying?" "They're debating whether you're handsome or just interesting looking." What's the verdict? Interesting looking is winning. But she smiled as she said it. The women helped Ayanna into a new dress, traditional Apache design, but made with traded cloth, deep blue with white beadwork. They braided her hair properly, weaving in feathers and small silver bells that chimed softly when she moved. When they finished, Samuel found himself staring. You look, Apache, beautiful. You looked beautiful before, but now you look complete. Mary, who spoke some English, laughed. New husband has good eyes. Not all white men see beauty in Apache women. Not all white men are worth seeing it, Ayanna replied, but her eyes stayed on Samuel. After the women left, promising to return with more supplies, Samuel and Ayanna faced the practical reality of their situation. The cabin needed fortification if the army came, but it also needed to look like a home, not a hideout. Teach me, Samuel said suddenly. Teach you what? Your language, your ways. If we're going to make this work, I can't be ignorant of half of who you are. She studied him for a long moment. Most white men want their wives to forget their Apache. I'm not most white men. No, she agreed. You're interesting looking. They spent the morning working side by side, Samuel learning Apache words for common objects while reinforcing the windows. Ayanna taught him to say, my wife, she atade, while showing him how to properly store dried meat the Apache way. Your pronunciation is terrible. Your patience is admirable. I'm wounded. Fighting you would hurt too much. They developed a rhythm part, necessity part dance. When her leg hurt, he carried her. When his hands shook, memories of violence triggered by the fortification work, she steadied them with her own. By noon, Colonel Morrison arrived with 6 soldiers. Samuel met them on the porch, Ayanna beside him in her new dress, the picture of domestic tranquility. Mr. Hayes, we've had reports of Apache hostiles in this area. No hostiles here, Colonel, just my wife and occasional visits from her family. Morrison's eyes narrowed. Your wife? Since when? Since yesterday. Pete Garrett performed the ceremony, legal and binding. And rather convenient given the timing. Ayanna spoke up, her English deliberately accented but clear. Is it crime to marry, Colonel? In your culture, women need protection of husband. Yes, I choose this protection. You're the woman Brennan's hunting. I am woman many hunt. Apache women are popular target. Her tone remained pleasant, but her words cut. Mr. Brennan tried to take what was not offered. My husband defended my honor. Is this not American way? Morrison shifted uncomfortably. Brennan says you have something that belongs to the government. I have nothing but clothes on my back and ring on my finger. She held up her hand showing Margaret's silver band. Unless government claims ownership of Apache women now, there's talk of a map. Gold. Samuel laughed harsh and bitter. Colonel, if we had a map to gold, would we be living in a cabin with bullet holes in the walls? Would my wife be wearing a patched dress and borrowed rings? Morrison looked around, noting the obvious poverty of the place, the simplicity of their possessions. Brennan seems certain. Brennan seems certain about a lot of things. Doesn't make them true. Samuel stepped forward. I served at Antietam, Fredericksburg, Chancellorsville. I've got the papers to prove it. Are you really going to take the word of a bounty hunter over a Union veteran? Your service is noted, Mr. Hayes, but it doesn't give you license to harbor my wife. I'm harboring my wife in my home, on my land. Unless the law's changed, that's still legal. Morrison was quiet for a moment. Then, we'll be watching Hayes. Any sign of hostile activity, any gathering of Apache warriors, and marriage or no marriage, we'll act. After they left, Ayanna sagged against the doorframe. That was close. That was just the beginning. He helped her inside. They'll be back. Then we'd better make this convincing. Over the next days, they transformed the cabin. Ayanna, despite her injury, insisted on adding touches of life, bright blankets on the walls, herbs hanging from the rafters, a small garden plot beside the door. Samuel built proper furniture, a real bed frame to replace his simple cot chairs that didn't wobble shelves for the books he'd hidden in a trunk. You read, she discovered his small collection, Shakespeare Emerson, a Bible with margin notes. Surprised, pleased. My father could read. The missionaries taught him. He said words were weapons white men used, so we should learn to use them too. She showed him her own treasure, a small journal where she'd written Apache stories in English, preserving them in the conqueror's language. Read me one. She chose the story of changing woman who represented the earth's cycle of renewal. As she read, Samuel found himself captured not just by the story, but by her voice. The way she gave weight to certain words made English sound like music. You should write these properly. Publish them. Under whose name Apache woman wife of white man, who would read them, people who need to know you're more than what they fear. That night, as they lay in their new bed, still careful of her wounds, still learning the geography of married closeness, she asked, "Do you regret it? The marriage, do you—" I asked first. He thought about it. "I regret that circumstances forced it, but the marriage itself, no. You. I grew up thinking I'd marry an Apache warrior, someone who understood the songs, the ceremonies, the weight of our history." She turned to face him in the darkness. "Instead, I married a white warrior who understands silence ghosts and the weight of survival. Maybe that's its own kind of ceremony." A week into their marriage, unexpected visitors arrived, a wagon full of women from town led by Mrs. Chen. They carried baskets of food, fabric needles, and thread. "New wife needs proper welcome," Mrs. Chen announced. "We bring gifts." Samuel watched, amazed, as the women took over his cabin. They helped Ayanna organize the kitchen, taught her white women's cooking tricks, shared gossip from town. But more than that, they offered acceptance, or at least curiosity, without hostility. "Why?" Ayanna asked Mrs. Chen when the others were occupied. "Why help us?" "Because," the older woman said carefully, "some of us know what it is to be stranger in strange land, to have love looked at with suspicion. My husband was Chinese. I am Mexican. We knew the weight of eyes." She patted Ayanna's hand. "You teach them Apache ways. They teach you white ways. Everyone learns. World becomes bigger." Not everyone was welcoming. Twice riders came at night shouting threats, firing shots into the air. Samuel returned fire, deliberately missing, but making his point. Ayanna stood beside him, each time rifle-steady presence, unwavering. "We can't keep fighting everyone," she said after the second incident. "Don't have to fight everyone, just have to outlast them. Hatred burns hot but short. Patience wins eventually." "You really believe that?" "I believe people get tired, and tired people want peace more than victory." She touched his face, tracing the scar. "You're an optimist disguised as a cynic. You're a warrior disguised as a wife. Can't I be both? Out here, you'd better be." 3 weeks after their marriage, Ayanna's leg had healed enough for her to ride. She insisted on checking the traditional Apache gathering places, looking for survivors, leaving messages in the old way, stones stacked in specific patterns, marks on trees that looked natural but carried meaning. Samuel rode with her rifle across his saddle, watching for threats. But what struck him was her connection to the land. She knew every plant, every water source, every place where the rocks sang in the wind. "This was our pharmacy," she said, showing him a grove where medicinal plants grew. "This was our church, at a natural amphitheater of stone. This was our school, at a place where petroglyphs told stories across centuries. It's beautiful. It's dying. Without people to remember, to teach, to practice, it's just landscape." She dismounted, touched a carved symbol that might have been a thunderbird or a man with wings. "That's why the map matters. Not for the gold, but for what the gold protects, the last place where all our stories are written in stone. We'll protect it." How were two people against an empire? Empires fall, stories survive, We just have to make sure the stories outlast the Empire. That night, she showed him an Apache ceremony for new beginnings. They built a fire outside, and she sang in her language while teaching him the proper responses. Their voices joined awkward at first, then finding harmony. The stars watched infinite and patient as two people built bridges out of words and silence, touch, and distance. "What did we just promise?" Samuel asked when the ceremony ended. "To walk the same path until one of us can't walk anymore. And then the one who can walk carries the other." He pulled her close, her back against his chest, both of them facing the fire. "I can live with that." "Good, because Apache ceremonies are binding, more than white man's law. You didn't mention that before. You didn't ask." A month after their marriage, the cabin looked like a home. Curtains in the windows, herbs growing in boxes, a rocking chair Samuel built for Ayanna to sit in while her leg finished healing. They'd developed routines: morning coffee, where she taught him Apache words; evening meals, where he told her stories from books he'd read; nights, where they learned each other's bodies with increasing confidence and decreasing hesitation. "We're becoming domestic," she observed one evening, watching him darn his socks while she beaded a new belt. "Is that bad?" "It's unexpected. I was raised to be a warrior's daughter. You were trained to be a soldier. Now we're this. This isn't nothing. This is choosing life over death, building over burning." He set down his needle. "Besides, warriors need somewhere to rest. Soldiers need something to fight for. Maybe this is what we were always meant to be. Just took us a while to find it." She moved to sit in his lap, something she'd started doing recently. Casual intimacy that still surprised them both. "Samuel Hayes, you're becoming philosophical. You're corrupting me with all that Apache wisdom." "Good. You are too rigid, like coffee that's never met water." "Now I'm coffee. Now you're coffee with just enough sweetness to be drinkable." They kissed, soft and familiar, now the urgency of new marriage, settling into something deeper. When they pulled apart, she stayed close, her forehead against his. "I love you," she said quietly, "not from necessity or gratitude or circumstance. I love you because you see me whole Apache and woman warrior and wife broken and healing. You don't try to fix me or change me. You just stay." Samuel's throat tightened. He hadn't said those words since Margaret hadn't thought he'd ever say them again. But looking at Ayanna, fierce and gentle, foreign and familiar, he knew the truth. "I love you too. God help us both. But I do." Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance. The rains were coming, would turn the desert green for a brief moment. Inside, two people held each other, their home, a small shelter against a vast and hostile world, but shelter nonetheless. The marriage that had started as strategy had become truth. The bridge between worlds was no longer just metaphor. It was made of shared meals and whispered words of bullets faced together, and quiet mornings in bed of Apache songs and English poetry mixing in the air like smoke from a sacred fire. They were building something, not just a home, but a possibility. A future where two worlds could meet without one destroying the other. It was fragile. It was dangerous. It was probably doomed, but it was theirs. 2 months into their marriage, the first test of their bridge between worlds arrived with the autumn winds. Samuel was repairing the chicken coop when he saw them, a line of riders approaching from the east, too many to fight, moving with purpose. But as they drew closer, he realized they weren't army or bounty hunters. They were Apache, maybe 15 of them, with women and children on travois behind the mounted warriors. Ayanna emerged from the cabin, flour in her hair from bread making, and gasped, "That's my uncle, Red Sky. I thought he was dead." The lead rider, a man in his 50s with a face carved by wind and loss, dismounted slowly. He and Ayanna spoke rapidly in Apache, and Samuel caught enough words to understand the basic survivor hiding heard about the marriage came to see. Red Sky turned to Samuel, his eyes cold as winter stone. "So, you're the white man who thinks he can own my niece." I'm the man who married her. Ownership doesn't enter into it. All-white marriage is ownership. The woman takes the man's name, lives in his house, bears his children, becomes his property. Ayanna stepped between them. Uncle, it's not like that. Isn't it? Red Sky looked around the cabin, the garden, the domesticity of it all. You wear white woman's ring. You cook in white man's kitchen. Soon you'll forget the songs, the stories, the prayers. You'll become another ghost with Apache blood and white soul. That's enough. Samuel's voice was quiet but firm. You want to insult me, fine, but you don't get to diminish her choices. Her choices? Red Sky laughed bitterly. What choice does she have? Our people are scattered or dead. The old ways are illegal. Even our ceremonies are forbidden by white law. You offer her survival, yes, but at what cost? The cost of rigidity, Ayanna said, her voice sharp. The cost of pride that would rather see us die pure than live adapted. Uncle, I haven't forgotten who I am, but I'm learning who I can become. Red Sky studied them both for a long moment. Then he spoke in Apache words that made Ayanna's eyes fill with tears. What did he say? He said, my father would be ashamed that I've chosen comfort over honor. Samuel felt anger rise in his chest, but before he could speak, one of the children with the group, a girl maybe 6 years old, tugged at Ayanna's dress. She spoke in Apache, pointing at the cabin. Ayanna knelt, listened, then smiled through her tears. She wants to know if this is the place where the kind white man lives, the one who gives water to thirsty people. The girl nodded, then ran to Samuel, holding out a small carved horse. She spoke again, and Ayanna translated. She says this is for you. Her grandfather carved it. He was one of the warriors you gave water to 3 years ago. He died last winter, but he told the story until the end. Samuel took the horse, his throat tight. Tell her it's beautiful. Tell her I'll treasure it. Red Sky watched this exchange, something shifting in his expression. The children know your story. Even in hiding, they know about the water giver. He paused. Perhaps I spoke too quickly. Perhaps you spoke from pain, Samuel replied. I know what it's like to see everything you value disappearing, but destroying what remains won't bring back what's lost. That night, the Apache band camped near the cabin. Samuel and Ayanna provided what food they could, beans flour, some preserved meat. Around the fire, the adults were still wary, but the children were curious, especially about Samuel. One boy, maybe 10, asked through Ayanna, "Did you really fight in the Great War between the whites?" "I did." "Did you kill many enemies?" Samuel was quiet for a moment. "I killed enough to know that killing solves less than we think it will." "But you were a warrior chief, a captain." "I was, and it brought me nothing but ghosts and scars." The boy considered this. "My father says white men love war." "Some do, just like some Apache love war. But most of us Apache and white just want to live to see our children grow to die peacefully in our sleep instead of violently in battle." Red Sky, who'd been listening, spoke in English for the first time. "Pretty words, but your people take and take. How do we live peacefully when you leave us nowhere to live?" "I don't have an answer for that," Samuel admitted. "I can't speak for all white men any more than you can speak for all Apache, but I can speak for this place, this home. Here, Apache and white can exist together. It's not much, but it's a start. And when the army comes, when they demand we move to the reservation, then we fight together. You would fight your own people for us. I'd fight anyone who threatens my family. And if you're Ayanna's family, you're mine too." Red Sky stared at him across the fire. "You mean that?" "I've meant everything I've said since your niece came into my life. She's teaching me that meaning what you say is the first step to building something real." Later, after the others had bedded down, Red Sky approached Samuel where he stood watch. "I need to tell you something, Water Giver. There are men coming. Not army, not bounty hunters. Government men from Washington. They have papers, authority, plans for this territory. What kind of plans? The kind that involve moving all Apache to reservations in Arizona, clearing this land for white settlement. They're calling it consolidation for the natives' benefit. Samuel's jaw tightened. When, within the month, maybe sooner, be. Red Sky paused. I came here partly to warn Ayanna, partly to see if this marriage was real or just strategy. And I see the way you look at her, the way she looks at you. It's real enough, but real won't stop what's coming. Maybe not, but it might change how we face it. Red Sky nodded slowly. There's a council in 5 days, hidden gathering at Cathedral Rock. All the scattered bands, what's left of us. We're going to decide fight, flee, or submit. Your voice would carry weight. I'm not Apache. No, but you're the bridge. Grandmother Nahas Zan saw it. I see it now. You stand between worlds. He turned to go, then stopped. Protect her water giver. She's the last who knows all the old songs. Without her, we're just people who used to be Apache. The next morning, the band prepared to leave. The children hugged Ayanna, and several of the women left small gifts, beaded items, dried herbs, a cradle board that made Ayanna blush. Optimistic gift, she muttered to Samuel. Practical people, your family. Our family, she corrected. You claimed them last night. Before mounting his horse, Red Sky clasped Samuel's arm in the warrior's greeting. The council, will you come? Samuel looked at Ayanna, who nodded. We'll be there. After they left, the cabin felt too quiet. Ayanna stood in the doorway, watching the dust settle. They think I'm losing myself, she said quietly. Are you? She turned to him. I'm changing. Is that the same thing? Margaret used to say that staying the same was just dying slowly. Your first wife was wise. Both my wives are wise. I'm the one who needs wisdom. She smiled small but real. The council will be dangerous. If the army finds out, then we deal with it together. 3 days later, unexpected visitors arrived from the other direction, a cavalry unit, but not hostile. The lieutenant in charge was young, nervous, clearly new to the territory. Mr. Hayes, I have a message from Colonel Morrison. Samuel took the letter, read it, his expression darkening. They want to census all Apache in the area, register them for protection and provision. The lieutenant shifted uncomfortably. It's for their benefit, sir. Regular food supplies, medical care, education for the children. On reservations. Eventually, yes. But that's better than starvation or conflict, isn't it? Ayanna stepped forward. Lieutenant, how old are you? 22, ma'am. I'm 25. In my lifetime, I've been moved 4 times by your government's protection, each time to smaller land, less water, fewer animals to hunt. Protection seems to mean taking everything and returning crumbs. I don't make policy, ma'am. No, Samuel said. You just enforce it, like I used to. He handed back the letter. Tell Morrison we'll comply with the census, but also tell him that forced relocation will be resisted. Is that a threat? It's information. What he does with it determines whether it becomes a threat. After the soldiers left, Samuel and Ayanna prepared for the council. She taught him the proper greetings, the signs of respect, the ways to show he came in peace. They may not accept you. I'm used to not being accepted. This is different. This is walking into a gathering of people your people have been killing. Our people, he corrected. Remember, I claim them. The night before the council, they lay together, both unable to sleep. Are you frightened? She asked, terrified. Of the Apache. Of failing you. Of this bridge we're building collapsing before it's even finished. She rolled to face him. Samuel, it's already built. Every day we wake up together, every meal we share, every word of Apache you learn, and every white custom I adapt to, we're living the bridge. The council, the army, the government, they can't destroy what we've already created. They can destroy us. They can kill us. That's not the same thing. She kissed him soft but certain. My grandmother saw you in dreams for 2 years. She saw this moment, us together facing the storm. She didn't see the outcome, but she saw the necessity. We're necessary, Samuel. This love, this marriage, this impossible bridge, it's necessary." He held her close, feeling the truth of her words, even as he feared for their future. Outside, owls called to each other, their voices carrying prophecies only they understood. The council at Cathedral Rock would change everything. Samuel knew it, felt it in his bones the way he used to feel incoming artillery. But for tonight, in their cabin, that had become a home, with his Apache wife in his arms and her family's gifts decorating their walls, he allowed himself to believe that necessity might be enough. The next morning, they rode toward Cathedral Rock. Samuel wore his best shirt and the turquoise ring Ayanna had given him. She wore her traditional dress and Margaret's silver band. They were visual representations of their bridge Apache and white traditional and adapted separate but joined. As they approached the hidden canyon where the council would gather, they saw other riders converging Apache bands from across the territory. Some Samuel recognized from town, others wild and wary as wolves. "Whatever happens," Ayanna said, "I'm proud to stand with you." "Whatever happens," Samuel replied, "I'm honored to stand with you." They entered the canyon together, two becoming one. The bridge made flesh and choice and stubborn love. The assembled Apache turned to watch them, and Samuel felt the weight of history of all the blood between their peoples. But he also felt Ayanna's hand in his steady and sure, and knew that sometimes the impossible becomes inevitable when two people refuse to let go. Red Sky met them at the canyon entrance. The water giver comes to council. Some say this is wrong. Others say this is what Grandmother Nahastzan foresaw. The debate has already begun. "Then let's finish it," Samuel said. They walked into the heart of the gathering, where the future of the Apache and their own future would be decided. The sun climbed higher, casting sharp shadows on the red rocks, and somewhere in those shadows, Samuel could almost feel Margaret's blessing and Nahastzan's spirit watching to see if the bridge they'd prophesied would hold. The council at Cathedral Rock had ended with fragile unity. The bands would resist relocation, but through legal channels, first violence only if forced. Samuel's presence, initially met with hostility, had shifted something when he stood and spoke in broken Apache about bridges being stronger than walls. 3 weeks later, the storm arrived not as weather, but as men. Samuel first saw the dust cloud from the ridge where he was checking trap lines. Too organized to be a cattle drive, too large to be a regular patrol. He rode hard back to the cabin where Ayanna was teaching two Apache children their letters, part of their new arrangement with Red Sky's band. "How many?" she asked, reading his face. 40, maybe 50. Mixed group Army civilians, some look like government men. The children's eyes went wide. Ayanna spoke quickly in Apache, and they ran toward the hidden canyon where their families camped. "We should go too," she said. "No, running makes us fugitives. We face this as what we are, legal residents on our own land." "Samuel, there are too many." "There are always too many. That's never stopped me before." She grabbed his arm. "This isn't Antietam. You can't fight a war alone." "I'm not alone." He pulled her close. "And this isn't about fighting. It's about standing." They had 20 minutes to prepare. Samuel loaded every rifle, set them at windows. Ayanna gathered the important papers, their marriage certificate, the land deed, his military discharge papers. She hid the sacred map under a floorboard along with her grandmother's medicine bundle. "If something happens," she started. "Nothing happens. We're going to bore them with paperwork and legality until they leave." "You're a terrible liar." "I'm an optimistic realist." The riders arrived in a cloud of dust and authority. At their head rode Colonel Morrison, but beside him was a man Samuel didn't recognize. Tall, thin, wearing a black suit despite the heat, with eyes like a snake studying prey. "Mr. Hayes." Morrison called out. "This is Federal Commissioner James Whitman. He's here to oversee the Apache consolidation." "Commissioner," Samuel nodded but didn't invite them in. Whitman dismounted with practiced elegance. "Mr. Hayes, war hero, I understand. Antietam, Fredericksburg. Quite a record." That was a long time ago. Service to one's country is never outdated. Whitman's smile was oil on water, which is why I'm sure you'll cooperate with the federal mandate to relocate all Apache to designated reservations. "My wife isn't going anywhere." "Your wife." Whitman pulled out a leather portfolio. "Yes, the rather convenient marriage to an Apache woman just as relocation orders were being drafted. Some might call that fraud." Ayanna stepped forward. "Some might call forced relocation genocide." Whitman's eyes flicked to her dismissive. Genocide is a strong word for protective custody. So is marriage for legal manipulation. Yet here we are. Indeed. Whitman opened his portfolio. "I have here sworn statements from Thomas Brennan and 6 other men claiming this marriage is a sham, that you're harboring Apache hostiles, and that your wife possesses stolen government property. Brennan's a liar and a drunk." "Perhaps. But 7 witnesses carry weight." Whitman pulled out another paper. "I also have emergency authority to dissolve marriages deemed fraudulent or coercive." Samuel felt Ayanna tense beside him. "You can't dissolve a legal marriage." "I can if I determine it was performed under duress or for purposes of avoiding federal law." Whitman's smile widened. "Unless, of course, you can prove otherwise." "How would we prove a marriage is real?" "Oh, I imagine time will tell. 9 months, perhaps, a child would certainly validate your union." His eyes traveled over Ayanna in a way that made Samuel's hand itch for his gun, though I doubt we'll need to wait that long. "What do you want, Whitman?" "Simple. Your wife and any other Apache in this area report for relocation within 3 days. Compliance will be rewarded with prime reservation land and adequate supplies. And if we refuse, then I declare martial law in this district, suspend habeas corpus, and take what I want anyway." He gestured to the soldiers. 50 men, Mr. Hayes, plus authority to call in 300 more from Fort Stanton. Your war record notwithstanding, those aren't odds even you can beat." Thunder rumbled overhead. Samuel looked up to see storm clouds massing, unusual for the season. 3 days, Whitman repeated. "I'd spend them saying goodbye." After they left, Samuel and Ayanna stood in their door, watching the dust settle. "We can't fight 50 soldiers," she said quietly. "Not directly." Then how Samuel was quiet for a moment. Then, "Your uncle mentioned Cathedral Rock. How many bands gathered there?" 7, maybe 8. 60 warriors plus women and children. Still not enough for a direct fight. "Then what are you thinking?" "I'm thinking about bridges." He turned to her. "What if we don't fight them? What if we make them irrelevant?" That night, they rode to Red Sky's camp. The discussion was heated, sometimes explosive, but by dawn, they had a plan. Not for war, but for witness. "You want us to simply stand there," Red Sky demanded. "I want you to stand as what you are, human beings, with families, children, dreams. Let them see you refuse to be moved, but also refuse to fight. Make them drag women and children from their homes. Make them be the monsters. And if they do, if they're willing to be monsters, then we document everything. I know journalists from the war, photographers. The Eastern newspapers love a scandal, especially one involving women and children." Joseph Crow Feather spoke up. "This is asking us to trust in white man's conscience. History says that's foolish. History says fighting the army directly is suicide. We need a different weapon." "Shame," Ayanna said suddenly. "He wants to use shame." "The commissioner has authority, has men, has guns. But does he have the stomach to massacre civilians in front of witnesses, to drag children from their mothers while photographers capture it?" "You're gambling with our lives," Red Sky said. "I'm gambling with all our lives, mine and Ayanna's included. We stand with you, whatever comes." The storm arrived the second night, not rain, but wind. A dust storm that turned the air brown and filled lungs with grit. Through it, Samuel and Ayanna worked with the bands, preparing not for battle, but for resistance. They taught the children songs to sing if soldiers came. They showed the women how to link arms to go limp if grabbed, to make every removal a struggle. The warriors were hardest to convince. Their instincts screamed for weapons, not passive resistance. "This isn't Apache way," one young warrior spat. "Neither is dying for pride," Ayanna shot back. "The old ways are gone. We can die with them or live to create new ways." The morning of the third day, Commissioner Whitman returned with his full force, but he found something unexpected. Not a scattered band of hiding Apache, but a gathering in the open valley. 60 warriors, women, and children standing in plain sight, unarmed, singing. And among them, a surprise that made Whitman's face darken. Pete Garrett was there with a camera on a tripod. Mrs. Chen stood with several women from town. Even the minister from Cedar Ridge had come, Bible in hand. "What is this?" Whitman demanded. Samuel stepped forward. "This is a community gathering, Commissioner, perfectly legal. These Apache are required to report for relocation. These American residents are exercising their right to peaceful assembly. They're not Americans, they're hostiles. They're human beings standing on land they've occupied for generations." Whitman turned to Morrison. "Colonel, arrest them all." Morrison hesitated. "Sir, there are women and children, and witnesses. If this goes badly, follow orders, Colonel." But as the soldiers moved forward, the Apache began singing louder, not war songs, but a lullaby, one every mother knew. The children's voices rose high and sweet. Pete's camera clicked steadily. "Stop that singing," Whitman ordered. They sang louder. "Colonel, make them stop." How Sir beat women and children for singing. The standoff stretched tension thick as the dust in the air. Then one soldier, young, maybe 18, stepped back. "I won't do it, sir. I won't drag children from their mothers." "You'll follow orders or face court-martial." "Then court-martial me. My mother would never forgive me for this." Another soldier stepped back. Then another. Whitman's face went purple. "This is mutiny. This is conscience," Morrison said quietly. "Commissioner, perhaps we should reconsider." That's when the storm truly hit. Not dust now, but rain, sudden and torrential, as if the sky had been holding its breath for 3 days, and finally exhaled. Thunder crashed overhead, lightning split the sky, and the carefully ordered military formation dissolved into chaos. In the confusion, Samuel heard it, horses approaching fast, not military moving wild and free. Apache reinforcements. No. As they burst through the rain, he saw they were riderless. The storm had spooked the Army's reserve horses, and they stampeded through the gathering, scattering soldiers, knocking over supplies. "The spirits," someone cried in Apache. "The thunder beings." Whether it was spirits or coincidence, the effect was the same. The soldiers, already demoralized, fell back. Whitman screamed orders no one could hear over the storm. The Apache stood their ground, rain streaming down their faces, still singing. Then Ayanna did something unexpected. She walked through the chaos to Whitman, who was trying to shelter under a wagon. "Commissioner," she said, voice carrying despite the storm, "you want the map, the gold. That's what this is really about." His eyes sharpened. "You admit you have it." "I admit nothing, but I offer you a choice. Leave us in peace, and the location stays hidden forever. Continue this persecution, and I promise you'll never find it. Even if you kill every Apache in the territory, the secret dies with us." "You're threatening me." "I'm offering you a way to save face. Tell your superiors the Apache are too scattered, the land too harsh, the cost too high. Recommend a treaty instead of relocation. You leave a statesman instead of a butcher." Whitman stared at her calculation in his eyes. The rain poured down, washing away his authority with each drop. "You have 1 week," he said finally. Draft a treaty proposal, something I can take to Washington that doesn't make me look weak. And if Washington rejects it, then next time I come with 500 men and no journalists." He turned to Morrison. "Colonel, withdraw the men." As the army retreated through the storm, the Apache began to celebrate, but Samuel caught Ayanna's arm. "You bought us time, not victory. Time is all we ever buy. The question is what we do with it." That night, in their cabin, with the storm still raging outside, they worked by lamplight, drafting a treaty. Red Sky, Joseph, and other leaders came and went, adding their voices. Mrs. Chain helped with the English, making sure every word was precise. "It's impossible," Red Sky said at one point. "They'll never accept Apache as equals." "They don't have to," Samuel said. "They just have to accept us as too expensive to remove." The treaty they drafted was unique. It didn't ask for a reservation, but for integration. Apache would become citizens, pay taxes, follow laws, but keep their sacred sites protected as historical landmarks. The Gold Mountain would become a protected religious site like the churches in town. "It'll never work," Joseph said. "It might not," Ayanna agreed. "But fighting definitely won't work. This, at least, has a chance." As dawn broke, the storm finally exhausted, Samuel stood on the porch looking at the damaged trees, down flooding everywhere, the landscape transformed. "The storm changed everything," Ayanna said, joining him. "Storms do that. Are you ready for what comes next?" He pulled her close. "I've been ready since the day you walked into my life and refused to leave." "I never walked in. You carried me, remember, best burden I ever bore." She kissed him soft despite everything they'd just survived. "The commissioner will be back. If Washington rejects the treaty, then we face that storm when it comes. But today, we won. Did we? Nothing's really changed. Everything's changed. Soldiers refused orders. Towns, people stood with Apache. A federal commissioner backed down. That's not nothing. It's not everything either. No, but it's a bridge. Stone by stone, we're building it." As the sun rose, painting the wet desert in shades of gold and red, other Apache began arriving at the cabin. They brought food, blankets, stories of the storm, and the stand they'd taken. The cabin meant for one had become a gathering place for many. Samuel watched Ayanna moving among her people, their people translating, mediating, bridging worlds with every word and gesture. This was what Nahaszen had seen in her dreams, not just a marriage, but a possibility. A future where Apache and white didn't mean enemy, where different could coexist with equal. Commissioner Whitman would return in a week. Washington would likely reject the treaty. The fight was far from over. But for now, in the aftermath of the storm, with his Apache wife beside him and her people around them, Samuel allowed himself to hope. Not for easy victory, but for the harder triumph of survival adaptation and the slow, patient work of building bridges that might actually hold. The week given by Commissioner Whitman passed like water through clenched fingers, too fast, never enough. Samuel stood in the courthouse at Cedar Ridge. Their treaty proposal spread across Judge Harrison's desk. The judge, a fair man worn down by impossible decisions, read each line with deepening furrows in his brow. "This is unprecedented haze. Apache as citizens, sacred sites as historical landmarks. You're asking me to support something Washington will laugh at. I'm asking you to support something that might prevent a massacre, or cause one. If this fails, Whitman will come back with overwhelming force." Ayanna spoke from beside Samuel. "Judge, my people have survived Spanish conquest, Mexican rule, and American expansion. We'll survive whatever comes. The question is whether this territory survives with blood on its conscience." The judge signed the proposal, his signature shaky. "God help us all. I'm either signing a peace treaty or death warrants." "Sometimes they're the same thing," Samuel said. "Peace always costs somebody something." The response from Washington came faster than expected. A telegraph delivered by a nervous courier just 5 days later. Samuel read it aloud to the gathered group in their cabin. Ayanna Red Sky, Joseph Pete Garrett, Mrs. Chen, and, surprisingly, Colonel Morrison, who'd come unofficially. Treaty proposal rejected. Full relocation to proceed immediately. Commissioner Whitman authorized to use all necessary force. Compliance expected within 48 hours. The silence that followed was heavy enough to break backs. "So we fight," Red Sky said finally. "We run," Joseph countered. "Disappear into the mountains." "For how long?" Ayanna asked. "Forever, always hiding, always running." Morrison cleared his throat. "There might be another way." Everyone turned to him. "I've been corresponding with General Crook. He's been implementing different policies in Arizona using Apache scouts, allowing limited self-governance on reservations. He believes in adaptation, not annihilation." "Reservations are still prisons," Red Sky spat. "Yes, but living prisoners can work toward freedom. Dead martyrs can't." Samuel felt the weight of decision crushing down. Everything they'd built, every bridge they'd constructed, collapsing into this moment. "There's a third option," Ayanna said quietly. "We use the map." "What?" She looked at each of them in turn. "The sacred mountain, the gold. What if we make it public? Not the location, but its existence. Create such a gold rush that the government has to step in to maintain order." "That's insane," Joseph said. "It would destroy everything. Everything's already being destroyed, but chaos we create is better than order they impose." Samuel understood suddenly. "You want to make us too valuable to remove. If Apache are the only ones who know the true location, if we're the only ones who can guide miners safely, the government would need us. Not want us, but need us." Morrison stood. "I can't be part of this discussion, but I can tell you that Whitman arrives tomorrow with 200 men. He paused at the door. "I can also tell you that supply wagons sometimes get misdirected in sandstorms. Might buy you an extra day." After he left, the debate raged through the night. By dawn, they'd reached a desperate consensus. They would partially reveal the map enough to create interest, but not enough to find the gold without Apache guides. Pete Garrett would photograph the fragment and telegraph it to newspapers in Santa Fe, Denver, and even San Francisco. The story would be simple. Apache woman reveals ancestral gold mine willing to share location for guarantee of territorial rights. "It's destroying our heritage for uncertain future," Red Sky said bitterly. "It's trading one sacred thing to save others," Ayanna replied. "The gold mountain will be overrun, but our people might survive." Samuel spent the morning preparing defenses while Ayanna worked with Pete on the photograph. She chose a fragment that showed gold veins but not geographic markers, tantalizingly real but functionally useless. By afternoon, the telegraphs were sent. By evening, the first responses came back. Newspapers wanted more information, exclusive rights proof of authenticity. Then Whitman arrived a day early despite Morrison's misdirection with his promised 200 men. He rode straight to the cabin, his face tight with controlled fury. "You've been busy, Hayes. Telegraphs to newspapers, creating a sensation. Creating options, Commissioner. You've created chaos. I have reports of 1,000 fortune seekers already heading this way. The governor is panicking." "Then perhaps the governor should reconsider our treaty." Whitman dismounted, walked close enough that Samuel could smell his pomade. "You think you're clever, but I have orders, and orders don't change because of newspaper stories." "No, but they change because of economics." Ayanna emerged from the cabin holding the real map. "Commissioner, this shows the location of not one but 7 gold deposits, all on sacred Apache land. Only we know how to read it fully. Remove us, and you remove the only guides to wealth that could fund your government for decades. Or I could simply take the map." "You could, but can you read it?" She showed him the symbols, the Apache markings, the coded landmarks. This isn't a white man's map. It's generation of oral tradition made visual. Without Apache interpretation, it's worthless. Whitman's jaw worked. Behind him, his men shifted restlessly. In the distance, dust clouds showed more riders approaching, whether fortune seekers or Apache reinforcements. It was impossible to tell. "You're playing a dangerous game, Mrs. Hayes." "I'm playing the only game you left us." That night, chaos erupted, but not as violence as a rival. Fortune seekers, journalists, photographers, even a senator from Colorado who happened to be visiting the territory. The cabin became the center of a growing camp, all wanting to see the Apache woman with the golden map. Whitman found himself not commanding a relocation, but managing a potential riot. Every attempt to arrest Ayanna was met with protests from miners who saw her as their key to fortune. "This is insanity," he told Morrison. "This is America," Morrison replied. "Gold changes everything." On the second day, a new telegram arrived, this one from Washington. "Suspend relocation pending investigation of mineral rights. Maintain order. Senate committee arriving to assess situation." Samuel found Whitman sitting on a rock outside the chaos, looking defeated. "You won," the commissioner said. "Nobody won. We just changed the game. Your wife will become a target. Every fortune seeker, every desperate man will want what she knows. She already was a target. Now at least she's a valuable one." Whitman stood. "The committee will arrive in a week. They'll want proof demonstrations guarantees. If this is a hoax, it's not. Then you've traded one form of destruction for another. The Apache will become tour guides to their own sacred sites. But they'll be alive, and present, and necessary." "Is that enough?" Samuel looked back at the cabin where Ayanna was teaching a group of miners basic Apache words they'd need to understand the map. "It's a start." The Senate committee arrived as promised, 3 men in black suits who looked at the desert as if it personally offended them. Ayanna performed for them, showing the map, explaining the symbols, leading them to a miner site where gold dust in the creek proved the deposits were real. "Remarkable," the lead senator said. "And you're willing to share this knowledge for a price." Which is Apache remain on their traditional lands as guides and protectors of the mining claims. We receive percentage of all gold found. Our children attend schools we help run. Our ceremonies are protected as religious freedom. That's substantial. So is the gold. It took another week of negotiation, but finally an agreement was reached. Not a treaty that would require Congress, but a territorial compact. The Apache Land and Mining Cooperative was established with Ayanna as translator and Samuel as legal representative. "We're business partners now," Whitman said with bitter irony as he signed the papers. "The savages and the government." "We were always partners," Ayanna replied. "You just didn't realize it until we had something you wanted." The transformation happened slowly. The cabin expanded into a trading post. Apache guides led mining expeditions. Gold flowed not in rivers but in steady streams. And with it came something unexpected: respect. Not love, not full acceptance, but the practical respect that comes from mutual benefit. Red Sky remained skeptical. "We're tour guides to our own destruction. We're survivors adapting to new world," Joseph countered. "As we always have." 6 months after the crisis, Samuel and Ayanna stood on the ridge overlooking their valley. Below, a small town was forming: Apache and white Mexican and Chinese, all drawn by gold, but held by community. "Grandmother would be horrified," Ayanna said. "Or proud. You built a bridge she couldn't have imagined. We built it, together." She turned to him, and he saw something new in her eyes. Not just love or determination, but hope. "I'm pregnant," she said quietly. Samuel's world shifted, reformed, shifted again. "When?" "7 months from now. Spring. When the desert blooms." He pulled her close, feeling the future pressing against them, uncertain, dangerous, but theirs. "Our child will be born into a world we're creating," she said. "Not Apache, not white, but something new. Something better, something possible." That night, they held a ceremony, Apache blessings, and Christian prayers led by Joseph and the minister from Cedar Ridge. The community gathered this impossible collection of former enemies, all bound by gold, and gradually, tentatively, by something more. Commissioner Whitman attended uncomfortable but present. Before leaving, he pulled Samuel aside. "You know this won't last. Gold runs out. Government policies change. This peace you've built is temporary. All peace is temporary, but so is war. The question is which we work toward extending." Whitman studied him. "You really believe this will work?" "I believe it's working. Today. That's all any of us really have." As the ceremony ended and people drifted back to their homes, Apache hogans next to miners' tents, Mexican adobes beside Chinese laundries, Samuel realized the bridge they'd built wasn't grand or beautiful. It was practical, rough-hewn, probably temporary, but it was standing, and people were crossing it in both directions. Spring came to New Mexico territory with unusual mercy that year, painting the desert in colors that usually existed only in Apache dreams: purple sage, yellow prickly pear blooms, the impossible blue of desert lupines. Samuel stood at the entrance of the new meeting hall they'd built at the center of their growing settlement, watching as people from every corner of the territory arrived. It had been exactly 1 year since Ayanna had first come to him at the spring, where water meets rock. Now their child grew within her, 7 months along, and the community they'd accidentally created was about to formalize what had grown organically. Nervous, Ayanna asked joining him. She moved carefully now, one hand supporting her swollen belly, but her eyes were bright with the same fierce determination that had first captured him. "Terrified," he admitted. "Fighting is easier than this. This is fighting, just with different weapons." The hall filled with an impossible mixture: Apache elders in traditional dress, white merchants in city suits, Mexican farmers in work clothes, Chinese laborers who'd come for the mining work and stayed for the community. Even Commissioner Whitman had returned from Washington, though his presence was official rather than celebratory. Pete Garrett had brought his camera again, but this time to document something other than confrontation. Mrs. Chen had coordinated the food, a mixture of every culture represented, spread on tables that groaned under the weight of shared abundance. Red Sky approached his face softer than it had been a year ago, though still marked by warranted suspicion. "The other bands have agreed. If this charter is signed today, we'll abide by it." The charter was their masterwork, a legal document establishing the settlement as neither fully white nor fully Apache, but something unprecedented: a cooperative township where governance was shared. Profits from the managed mining operations were distributed by contribution rather than race, and both Apache and English were recognized languages. "Washington won't like it," Whitman had warned. "It sets a precedent they'll fear." "Let them fear it," Samuel had replied. "Fear might teach them to think before they destroy." Now, as the ceremony began, Samuel stood before the assembled crowd. He'd prepared a speech, but abandoned it, speaking instead from his scarred heart. "A year ago, I was a man hiding from life in a cabin built for one. I'd convinced myself that isolation was safety, that the only way to avoid loss was to avoid connection. Then an Apache grandmother died in my arms, asked me to protect her granddaughter, and changed everything I thought I knew about survival." He looked at Ayanna, who smiled despite the tears gathering in her eyes. "We're here today, not because we've solved the problems between our peoples, but because we've agreed to face them together. This charter isn't perfect. This community isn't paradise. We still have those who hate based on skin, who fear based on difference. But we also have children playing together who don't know they're supposed to be enemies. We have families sharing meals across cultures. We have life growing where there was only suspicion." Joseph Crow Feathers stood next, speaking first in Apache, then in English. The old ways are dying. This is truth we cannot deny. But death can be transformation if we choose it. The butterfly doesn't mourn the caterpillar. Today we choose to transform rather than simply disappear. One by one, representatives of each group spoke. The Chinese about finding home in unlikely soil. The Mexicans about borders that exist in hearts more than on maps. The white settlers about learning that civilization isn't about imposing, but about adapting. Finally, Ayanna rose, moving carefully to the podium. My grandmother saw this in dreams. Not the details. She couldn't have imagined Chinese laundries next to Apache hogans or white ministers learning Apache prayers. But she saw the bridge, people crossing in both directions, carrying their traditions but willing to share them. She pulled out something wrapped in deerskin, the complete map, all 3 pieces united. This map led to gold, yes. But gold isn't the treasure. The treasure is what we choose to build with that gold. Schools where all children learn, medical clinics that serve everyone, preservation of sacred sites alongside new construction. The treasure is choosing cooperation over conquest. She held the map high, then in a gesture that made the crowd gasp, she tore it into pieces and scattered them to the wind. The old secrets are released. The new ones will create together. The charter was signed by 43 representatives, each signature a small revolution against the way things had always been done. Whitman signed last, his face unreadable. "You know they'll try to destroy this," he told Samuel privately. "If not this administration, then the next. Maybe. But every day it survives is a day children grow up seeing possibility instead of impossibility. That might be enough." After the ceremony, as the celebration continued into the night, Samuel found himself standing with Ayanna at the same spring where they'd first met. The water still bubbled from the rock, constant despite all the change around it. "Do you think we've betrayed them?" Ayanna asked. "The ancestors by choosing adaptation over resistance. I think the ancestors wanted their children to live. How they live. That's for the living to decide." She took his hand, placed it on her belly. The baby kicked strong and insistent. "What do we tell this child about who they are, where they belong? We tell them they're the bridge incarnate, that they belong everywhere and nowhere, and that's not a curse, but a gift. We tell them their existence proves that different peoples can create something together that neither could create alone. That's a heavy burden for a child, or a magnificent freedom. Depends on how we frame it." As they walked back to the celebration, they passed the cemetery where Nahastzan had been buried with both Apache and Christian rites. Someone had left fresh flowers, desert marigolds that glowed in the moonlight. She knew. Ayanna said softly. Somehow, she knew not just that we'd be together, but that we'd create this. Maybe she didn't know. Maybe she just hoped with such fierceness that the universe had no choice but to comply. The celebration continued until dawn, when the first light painted the settlement in gold, not the gold of metal, but of possibility. Samuel stood on their porch, now expanded to accommodate their growing family, and watched as the town woke. Apache women heading to the new school to teach traditional weaving, white men joining Apache hunting parties to learn desert survival, Chinese merchants trading silk for turquoise, Mexican farmers teaching everyone how to make desert soil bloom. It wasn't perfect. There were still fights, still prejudices, still those who prophesied doom. But there was also laughter across language barriers. There were also marriages like theirs, creating children who would never fit in only one world. There was also the slow, patient work of building something that had never existed before. "What do we call this place?" Ayanna asked, joining him with 2 cups of coffee, his weak hers, strong enough to wake the dead. "Home," Samuel said simply. "That's not a name." "Then how about Hope, New Mexico?" She considered it. The Apache word is ahahi. It means both thank you and hope for the future. Then that's what we call it, both names, neither complete without the other. As the sun climbed higher, people began gathering for the day's work, the mining operations that funded everything, but didn't define everything, the building of new homes for arriving families, the planning of irrigation systems that combined Apache knowledge of water with modern engineering. Commissioner Whitman prepared to leave for Washington. His report would determine much of their future. He stopped at their porch. "I've recommended federal recognition of your charter," he said, "not because I believe in it, but because the alternative is chaos. You've made yourselves too valuable to destroy." That was always the plan, Samuel admitted. Was the child part of the plan, too? He gestured at Ayanna's obvious pregnancy. "The child is hope made flesh," Ayanna answered, "planned or not necessary." After Whitman left, Samuel and Ayanna stood together, watching their impossible community continue its daily work of existing. In a few weeks, their child would be born, the first of what they hoped would be many bridges in human form. "We did it," Ayanna said quietly. "We built the bridge grandmother saw." "We started building it," Samuel corrected. "Bridges are never really finished. They need constant maintenance, constant choice to keep crossing." She leaned into him, his arm around her shoulders, her hand on their unborn child. "Then we keep choosing. Every day, every generation, every moment." The desert wind carried the sounds of their settlement laughter in 3 languages, hammers, building futures, children, learning each other's songs. It wasn't the ending of their story, but the beginning of something larger, something that would outlive them all. In the place where water meets rock, where Apache tradition met American ambition, where 2 broken people had chosen to build rather than burn, a new world was being born. Not perfect, not permanent, but possible. And in the high desert of New Mexico territory, under a sun that blessed and burned in equal measure, possibility was enough to build a life on. The Thunderbird that had brought them together seemed to spread its wings over the entire settlement, protecting not just Apache or white, but everyone who chose to stand on the bridge and look forward rather than back. Hope New Mexico Ahehi had begun.